Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 57th episode of Don't Forget the Popcorn. Independent films are some of my favorite movies to watch. They typically feature alternative subject matter, lesser known actors, and a low budget that can often lead to movie magic. Some of the best and most successful films of all time were indies, particularly horror films being some of the standouts. Evil Dead, The Blair Witch, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre are some examples of critically and commercially successful indie horrors that stood the test of time and are considered some of the best of the genre. Every Halloween, we round up our Halloween watches and evaluate what are some of the best and worst of the genre are. Horror films have evolved tremendously over the years, with gore and special effects looking insanely realistic and gruesome. Yet, with all this technology, most of the old low budget practical effects still have more of a charm than these realistic, creepy looking ones. We still hail and praise Sam Raimi's Evil Dead when the new ones are some of the goriest, grittiest stuff we've ever seen. John Carpenter's The Thing special effects are still considered groundbreaking. I mean, that movie is still so effective visually 40 years later. True classics will just never die in a genre flicks. And one film that is very much still alive is The Night of the Living Dead. Night of the Living Dead was released in 1968, directed by George A. Romero. He also co-wrote it, did the cinematography, and edited the film. It stars Dwayne Jones and Judith Odea in the lead roles, with some controversy in the casting of Jones as the lead due to him being black. Romero stated he auditioned the best. Outside of Sidney Poitier, we weren't seeing black leads in predominantly white films at the time. So Jones is sort of a pioneer in that right. The black dude back then actually didn't die first. Romero handled this well. The movie flows seamlessly without his race really having anything to do with the story. He's treated just as a character. He is the smartest and bravest character out the bunch. In my own thoughts, I think the casting of a black man in a movie like this is brilliant and forward thinking, although it wouldn't make the movie any better or worse in the moment. In the 60s, the civil rights movement was going on, a time where blacks were not seen on the same level of intellect as the white man. What this movie shows is that in an apocalyptic setting, those society norms and stereotypes that we have built up are out the window. It's survival of the fittest and smartest, and the bravest will lead and survive. In this case, it was a black man amongst several white men and women. Romero showed us this at a time where we as a society may have needed to see that, to push forward the notion that all men are created equal. Jones dominated this role and was a great leader. It was unheard of seeing a black man making all the decisions and moves like that back then. The rest of the cast is pretty decent in this, with everyone understanding the assignment pretty well. None of these actors were big names, which I think is one of the charms of this movie. It was made for around 100K, completely guerrilla filmmaking to save money. The movie pretty much takes place in a cemetery and a house and has a lot of magic in its minimalism. This made up for some of the things that he probably couldn't get it to look so real. Like the use of blood was probably more effective in black and white than in color, like in Hitchcock's Psycho. I also think it makes you focus on the story more and not so much on the effects, because the story, although a simple one, is still very good. We as movie fans and cinephiles really have to tip our hats to filmmakers who can make a movie this effective at this cost. It's honestly so incredible what some people can do with so little. This film is influential in that right on its own, and of course, amongst other things as well. Up until this point, horror movies were not on the level of what Romero gave us here in the late 60s. And this put zombies right at the forefront of formidable villains in horror films. Pre 1970s horror wasn't doing it like this. When you watch this film now, it's just one of those classics that you know will never die. This film terrified young audiences as it was released unrated during matinee screenings and a pre-MPAA rating system. Young children were mortified at what they were seeing, and the bleak ending left watchers feeling empty. But looking ahead, this film may be one of the most influential horror films and just plain movies ever made. You watch this and you can think of 1,000,001 films who have taken techniques, tropes, and the style that this movie did first. And trust me, this is more than a know your roots kind of watch. This movie is good and holds up and rivals any horror movie from recent history. We owe so much of this film, especially if you are a horror fan. Its influence is felt to this day and helped push the zombie craze and showed us the heights horror can be taken to. This film has had influence on more than just horror. The guerrilla filmmaking style has been a staple in indie filmmaking. I can't express enough. No matter how you feel about this movie, you absolutely cannot deny its effects and its importance and cultural significance. I mean, even if you haven't seen it, you've seen the title. It's one of the best zombie movie titles of all time. Now that we got all that sappy appreciation crap out of the way, let's get into the meat of the movie. So this film jumps right out the gate with action. We get the first attack right away. We don't get really any background. We have a young woman and her brother visiting their father's grave, and boom, zombie is attacking them, and the young lady is running for her life. She runs into a nearby home where she finds the owner dead. Ben shows up, and that's where the fun begins. Ben and Barb have to think quick in order to survive. What's great about this movie is just when you think you have everything figured out, something or someone new pops out at you. From here on out, most of the film takes place in this house, with the exception of a montage showing the origin of the issue and some rangers hunting down zombies. This seemingly comes out of nowhere, like most of the zombie movies and shows we see today. We have seen the beats of this film all over horror and zombie pictures since, and there's a reason for it. It works, and it does very well. The simplicity and minimalism is where its strength lies. People in a house trying to figure out what their next move is. Ben shows his leadership and intelligence right away. We see him taking precautions, making the place safe, and setting up the house to make it feasible for the situation. He even gets the TV and radio set up to keep updated on the issue. Romero layers this simple horror story nicely, perfectly pacing along the action and tension building between the characters. Some of the players introduced a little later play a major role in this, as they have a sick child with them. This film has all the typical character archetypes you see in these kind of movies. Two men fighting for leadership, a young screaming woman, a young guy who's diplomatic, a mother, a child, you name it. One thing about this movie is it's not a gore fest. It's not super scary, but it does keep you at the edge of your seat. It builds tension nicely, and in this short runtime, you do care about the characters. You want them to figure it out. You want to see them survive. I mean, Ben was absolutely a blueprint for characters like Ash from The Evil Dead. As the characters start moving forward with the plan, so do the zombies with theirs. Romero beautifully creates a black and white world of terror with a hazy, dark, and gritty wilderness filled with zombies. There's Zeds everywhere. I mean, everywhere. The way Romero got all of them in the frame, the way he did it was just brilliant. Totally guerrilla style filming this all on location in PA. I can't help but marvel at what he created. As the night gets darker and the zombies grow restless, it starts to dial up as we come to a close, and there are some fun twists and turns. Some you see coming and some you don't. This movie has one of the most unique and conversation-starting endings. I will not reveal that in case some haven't seen it, but it's one that's been imitated many times in various ways. I will say, it did leave me feeling very empty, although I thoroughly enjoyed the film. It's hard to criticize a movie like this for a number of reasons. One, it was made for $100,000. Two, it was outside the Hollywood system. Three, it was made with people who all have very little filmmaking experience. And most of all, it's one of the most influential films of all time, and it's a straight banger that every horror fan should have in their collection. This is a staple in horror and in movie history, and this should be at the very top of your Halloween watch list for this year. This is an example of a true classic. So with that said, I feel like I have to give Night of the Living Dead a perfect 10. Now, I don't give these out lightly, but any movie with this influence on other films, pop culture, and zombie lore have to get this score. It's like The Godfather may not be your favorite movie, but you understand that it's a 10 out of 10 for all the reasons Night of the Living Dead is. Guys, make sure you watch this movie this Halloween, especially if you haven't seen it. Guys, thank you so much for watching my Night of the Living Dead review. Let me know if there is a film you'd like me to review. I got a podcast with my buddy, The Cutting Room Floor. I'll link that below for more movie content. Check that out. We got a really cool video up here. It's linked below. Check me out on Letterboxd, Ralph Vader. I'll link that below as well. Make sure you like and subscribe. I'll be back next week. And don't forget the popcorn.